Painting a seal point cat on a plaster casting. This is our own fat cat plaster paperweight casting done in seal point. They are available painted and unpainted. To paint your own, you will need acrylic paint. We used a deep ivory and a white for the first coat. Put on your deep ivory, then use the white to highlight the areas, then a soft brush dipped in water to blend the two colors together. Do not try to do the entire cat at once, as acrylic dries very fast. I try to work on about a quarter of the cat at a time. No, I'm not this fast. I wish I was. I double-speeded the video in order to fit it in the 10-minute allotment on YouTube. You do not have to be religiously precise, and expect this entire project will take you 2 to 3 hours depending on your current skills. As I said, we used deep ivory paint acrylic, the thin liquid craft variety, not the artist tube, white acrylic, raw umber acrylic, and then we used the rub and buff gold metallic to give highlights to the final piece. Here, this is our cat ready to add the dark brown touches. We added water to the acrylic paint to make it more liquid, as we're going to be using it as an antiquing fashion. Again, you don't want to cover too much at one time, because you're going to take a damp sponge and remove most of the dark brown paint, leaving it just in the crevices. Right around the roll of fat behind the neck, you want to add extra dark brown paint to highlight this area. You can use this on any plaster cat that you have available. Just remember, the more detail that's in the mold, the better this cat technique will work. Remember to rinse your sponge out on occasions and to squeeze most of the excess water out. You want it just barely damp. Here we're adding the dark seal point masking to the face. This first coating, we're simply going to wipe off much of the dark brown. The eventual piece will have the dark brown to the face applied in several layers for more depth. I do consider this a project suitable for young teenagers and above. We're almost finished now with this first dark brown antiquing layer. Our seal point will end up eventually very dark indeed. If you over-darken a certain area, just go back and touch it up with the lighter acrylic paints. Again, we leave most of the dark paint in the deep crevices on the model. This is our second coating on the face to do the dark facial mask. And I use a brush to feather out in long strokes, going from the inside of the mask to the outside of the cheeks and forehead. This is almost a dry brushing effect. While I'm shown using a fan brush, any brush where the bristles are spread slightly apart would work for this. I just happen to have a fan brush. Now I'm painting a dark brown coating on the tail. I have added enough water to the paint so that it is very liquid. This will allow the high areas to come through for a natural highlighted effect, without my having to go back and paint them separately. I use a wider brush for the majority of the tail, and then go forward and do the dark paws in the front of the cat. To add very small strokes along the base of the tail and on the paws, just on the edges for a nice crisp setting, you'll want to use a small detail brush. Now, because I'm wanting to create a very dark seal point, I'm going along the back base with more dark paint for a second layer. The cat I happen to own has very dark banding stripes right along the center of his back and up his neck, as well as darker areas on his thighs and his belly. He's a very dark ragdoll. I'm using my small detail brush to go in and do a dark brown outline around the edge of the ears. This is the most persnickety part of the whole project. Remember, the interior of the ears will be a lighter color, but you can use your fine brush to dry brush the edges in on the ears so that it'll make the hair in the ears stand out better. And again, we're going to go back and we're going to darken select areas so that we end up with a nice dark seal point. And we'll use our sponge to wipe off any areas that we think are excessive. Notice the quick dabbing motion of the brush. I thought the ears could benefit from a second coat, so I'm going in and deepening the outline around the ears, and then I'm selectively going back and adding some deep dark shadows to make the cat pop. Especially nice touch is to add some very fine, thin lines where the tail brushes across the back of the cat. Yes, this is probably a bit of overkill, but I'm just a perfectionist, so bear with me. This is one of those projects that can be as simple or as complicated as the crafter desires. I'm adding shadows around the bottom of the paws and darkening the underside of the belly so it looks more like my cat. The next step is to take the gold metallic rub and buff. Only do this after you've set the acrylic cat aside to dry completely. Lightly rub some of the buff on your finger and your thumb, and then just very lightly go across the top of the cat. You don't want to rub too hard. You basically just want the gold to highlight the high areas on the cat. You can add as little or as much gold as you like. In fact, if you painted the entire cat and you absolutely can't stand it, then you could take a brush and apply the gold and end up with a solid gold metallic cat. Okay, now we're ready to add the leather for the base of the paperweight. I've put my cat on the leather. I've drawn around it with an ink pen. I'm going to take my scissors and cut out just slightly inside the ink line. I used simple white glue on the base of the cat to press the leather into. Use your fingers to press firmly in place. You're finished. This is your fat cat in seal point. I hope you enjoyed the class.